Dear friends, when I was young, someone told me a truth I didn't want to hear. Your life won't rise until you do. I laughed it off. But life, it has a way of proving you wrong. Years later, I met a man who felt stuck. Same job, same complaints, same excuses. He said life wasn't giving him opportunities. I asked, "Are you growing fast enough to handle the opportunities you're asking for?" He went silent, and that silence taught me something. Most people don't lack opportunities, they lack the version of themselves required to handle them. Today, I want you to remember one truth. If you want a life that feels different, you have to become someone different. Not tomorrow, not someday. Now, the first key point is recognize the gap between who you are and who you want to be. And this begins with confronting the truth you've spent months, maybe years, avoiding. Most people live in a comfortable illusion, convinced they're doing okay even when their life feels stuck, stagnant, repetitive. But improvement demands a mirror, not a mask. You have to be willing to sit with your own reflection long enough to notice the cracks you've trained yourself not to see. It's uncomfortable, yes. It's confronting, absolutely. But nothing powerful ever begins in comfort. Growth starts the moment you stop defending your limitations and start examining them. For many people, this gap shows up as frustration. You want more money, but your work ethic hasn't changed. You want deeper relationships, but your communication is inconsistent. You want confidence, but avoid the challenges that build it. The gap isn't just a space between two versions of you. It's a collection of choices, habits, fears, and stories you tell yourself to justify staying where you are. When you look closely, you'll notice how often you settle for good enough, even though your soul keeps whispering that good enough is not what you were built for. That whisper is not dissatisfaction, it's direction, and recognizing the gap isn't about self-criticism, it's about self-respect. It's about admitting that the life you want won't be handed to you. It has to be matched by the person you're becoming. When you understand that your identity is the root and your results are the fruit, everything shifts. You stop blaming circumstances, you stop blaming luck. You stop waiting for the perfect moment. Instead, you begin to realize that the life you envy in others isn't built by magic. It's built by people who were brutally honest about where they were falling short. They didn't shame themselves, they upgraded themselves. To recognize the gap, you must ask the questions you usually avoid. What habits are destroying my progress? What excuses do I repeat so often they sound like facts? Where am I choosing distraction over discipline? These questions sting because they expose the truth. Your success is not limited by your potential, it's limited by your patterns. You can want a better life with your whole heart, but wanting doesn't create transformation. Awareness does. Awareness forces you to admit what you've been running from. You can't become your future self while clinging to your past behaviors. Once you see the gap clearly, something powerful happens. Your standards shift. You stop being satisfied with minimal effort. You stop treating your goals like wishes. You stop accepting the version of you that settles, delays, avoids, and excuses. This shift is the turning point. Because when the gap becomes undeniable, the desire to close it becomes unstoppable. You start realizing that improvement isn't optional, it's necessary. And not because someone expects it from you, but because you finally expect it from yourself. The truth is, every person who transformed their life began right here, with a moment of clarity so sharp it cut through years of denial. They recognized the gap and refused to make peace with it. They refused to let who they were sabotage who they could become. And when you make that same decision, when you decide that staying the same is more painful than changing, your transformation begins. Not someday, not eventually, but the moment the honesty becomes louder than the excuses. The second key point is stop negotiating with your weakness, because every time you entertain the conversation, you give your lesser self the authority to run your life. Weakness doesn't show up with a loud announcement. It slips in quietly, disguised as comfort, disguised as a break you think you deserve, disguised as a harmless excuse whispered softly enough that you barely notice you're agreeing to it. It tells you you're tired, you've done enough, you can start later. But weakness has one goal: to keep you exactly where you are. And the moment you start debating with it, you've already lost half the battle. Growth begins when you refuse to sit at the negotiation table with the part of you that wants to stay small. Weakness wins because it knows your patterns. It knows when you're stressed, when your motivation dips, when you feel overwhelmed. It knows how to speak your language. Just 5 more minutes of rest. You deserve it. Or, you'll do it tomorrow, what's the rush? The danger is that these statements sound reasonable, almost caring. They imitate compassion but deliver destruction. Once you recognize that weakness manipulates you by sounding friendly, you start to understand why so many dreams die quietly, without struggle. Not because people lacked talent or opportunities, but because they kept believing the lies whispered by their own comfort. To stop negotiating with weakness, you must build a level of self-awareness that catches excuses in real time. Think about how many moments you've given away because the easier option felt justified. You didn't skip the workout because you were incapable. You skipped it because you allowed weakness to convince you your feelings mattered more than your goals. You didn't delay the project because it was impossible. You delayed it because weakness sold you the illusion of a better time. When you stop giving emotional weight to these arguments, you regain control. You begin to see excuses as impulses, not instructions. And the truth is, weakness rarely needs a full argument to win. All it needs is your hesitation. That tiny pause where you consider the easier option is enough for it to gain momentum. That's why people who transform their lives often operate with a simple rule. If it needs to be done, it gets done. No negotiation. They remove emotion from commitment. They don't wait for motivation. They don't ask themselves how they feel about the task. They execute because execution is the only language progress understands. When you stop discussing and start doing, you shift from being driven by feelings to being driven by purpose. Of course, eliminating negotiation doesn't mean eliminating humanity. It means eliminating the part of you that weaponizes your humanity against your growth. You can rest, but not because weakness convinces you to. You rest because you've earned it intentionally. You can adjust your goals, but not because weakness persuades you to shrink them. You adjust because strategy demands it. By refusing to negotiate, you separate discipline from mood, and once that separation happens, you become unstoppable. Weakness loses its influence because it can only control the version of you that hesitates. Over time, this mindset becomes your armor. You notice the excuses faster. You silence them earlier. You act before the negotiation even begins. As this strengthens, something remarkable happens. The identity that once craved comfort becomes the identity that craves growth. You start choosing the harder path instinctively, not because it's easier, but because you know it leads somewhere. Weakness becomes quieter, not because it disappears, but because you stop giving it attention. And that is the moment discipline becomes natural, not forced. That is the moment your future finally feels within reach, not because the world changed, but because you stopped letting your weakest self make decisions for your strongest life. The third key point is choose the hard things on purpose, because the path of least resistance might feel safe, but it rarely leads anywhere meaningful. Most people drift through life choosing whatever demands the least effort, believing that avoiding discomfort protects them. But what it really protects is mediocrity. Every comfort you choose becomes a cage you build around your own potential. The hard things, the early mornings, the disciplined habits, the difficult conversations, the sacrifices nobody sees. These are the very things that stretch you. They don't just build strength, they reveal it. Choosing difficulty is not self-punishment, it is self-respect in action. When you intentionally choose the harder path, you signal to yourself that you trust your own capacity to grow. Most people never experience their true capabilities because they never push themselves far enough to discover them. Think about the moments that shaped you the most. They weren't the effortless ones, they were the ones that demanded everything from you. They were the moments when you felt pressure, challenge, uncertainty, and yet you pushed forward anyway. Improvement is born exactly in those spaces where you want to quit. And by choosing hard things intentionally, you expand the boundaries of who you believe you can become. Hard choices force you to confront your weaknesses instead of protecting them. When you choose the challenging path, you expose the parts of yourself that need work. Your impatience, your lack of discipline, your fear of failure, your tendency to procrastinate. It's uncomfortable to see these flaws, but necessary. Because you cannot grow what you refuse to face. Every difficult task becomes a mirror, showing you exactly where your next level begins. The more you seek out challenge instead of avoiding it, the clearer your growth path becomes. Comfort hides your flaws, difficulty exposes them, and exposure is the beginning of evolution. Choosing hard things intentionally also builds a powerful mental identity. You stop seeing yourself as someone who avoids struggle and start seeing yourself as someone who runs toward it. This identity shift is transformative because once you believe you can handle hard things, your world expands. Obstacles that once intimidated you become challenges you expect yourself to overcome. Opportunities that once overwhelmed you become arenas where you're ready to perform. Life doesn't get easier, but you get stronger, and that strength changes everything. You walk differently, you decide differently, you dream differently. Many people wait for external motivation before tackling the difficult parts of their life. But motivation is unreliable. It fades with mood, fatigue, stress, and circumstances. Discipline, however, is built exactly by doing the things you don't feel like doing. The hard things you choose daily. Waking up before you want to, saying no when it's uncomfortable, working when you feel tired, practicing when nobody claps. These micro moments forge the internal steel that motivation alone can never create. The hardest tasks create the strongest habits, and the strongest habits create the most unshakable confidence. Over time, choosing the hard path becomes less of a struggle and more of a standard. You start to crave the growth that challenge brings. You stop avoiding the climb and start respecting it. Hard things don't break you, they build you into someone capable of carrying dreams that once felt too heavy. And as you keep choosing the difficult road intentionally, you begin to notice something profound. Your life expands every time you refuse the easy way out. The version of you that emerges is not accidental. It is sculpted by every ounce of effort you were once tempted to avoid. The fourth key point is build habits that don't ask how you feel. Because a life built on emotion will always collapse under pressure. Feelings are inconsistent. They rise, they fall, they shift with weather, stress, sleep, and circumstance. But habits built on commitment don't fluctuate. They don't bargain. They don't wait. They execute. And the reason so many people stay stuck is because their actions depend on their moods. If they feel inspired, they work. If they feel tired, they stall. If they feel discouraged, they retreat. But greatness isn't crafted on days you feel good. It's crafted on days you show up despite feeling otherwise. Think about the most successful, disciplined, unstoppable individuals you've ever admired. Their secret is not superhuman motivation, it's structure, it's systems, it's habits that carry them forward even when their energy is low, their mind is heavy, or their emotions are scattered. They don't wake up every day eager to grind, they wake up with habits that pull them into motion. When you build routines that are stronger than your excuses, you eliminate the biggest barrier to improvement, inconsistency. You no longer rely on inspiration, you rely on identity. Habits that don't ask for your feelings work like rails on a train track. They guide your direction even when visibility is low. They prevent you from derailing when stress hits or life gets messy. When you commit to a habit, whether it's waking up early, training daily, reading consistently, practicing your craft, or dedicating time to mental clarity, you create a foundation that supports your goals automatically. The habit becomes the default. The behavior becomes normal. And once something becomes normal, it becomes sustainable. That's the shift most people never reach because they quit before consistency kicks in. The hardest part is the beginning, those early days when the habit feels unnatural, heavy, inconvenient. This is where most people give up, not because the habit is impossible, but because they expected it to feel good immediately. Habits don't reward you at the start, they test you, they strip away your comfort so they can rebuild your discipline. They challenge your old identity so they can shape your new one. And if you push through that initial resistance long enough, something remarkable happens. The habit becomes a part of you. It stops being a task and starts being a truth. This is what I do, this is who I am. When you adopt habits that operate independently of your emotions, you create internal freedom. You are no longer controlled by laziness, fatigue, or impulse. You become someone who acts with intention, not reaction. You start achieving in weeks what others can't achieve in years because they keep waiting to feel ready. Readiness is a lie. Nobody ever feels fully prepared to pursue a better life. The people who rise are the ones who move anyway. When your habits are automated, progress becomes inevitable. You don't need hype, you need discipline engineered into your daily life. And as your habits strengthen, something powerful shifts in your mindset. Your feelings begin to adapt to your actions, not the other way around. Instead of waiting for motivation to drive your habits begin to create motivation. You feel better because you act better. You gain confidence because you keep your promises to yourself. You trust yourself because you've built a system that doesn't collapse when your mood changes. This is how real transformation happens, not through bursts of energy, but through consistent commitments that function whether you feel like it or not. The fifth key point is accept that growth will be lonely before it's beautiful. Because the moment you decide to rise, you automatically separate yourself from the version of life that kept you comfortable. People talk about self-improvement as if it's a glamorous journey full of support, applause, and encouragement. But in reality, the first stage of growth feels like stepping into a room where suddenly nobody understands you. The things you used to enjoy don't satisfy you anymore. The people you used to relate to feel distant, and the habits you once found normal begin to feel heavy. This loneliness isn't a punishment, it's an invitation. It's life clearing the noise so you can finally hear your own ambition without interference. When you start improving, not everyone around you will celebrate your transformation. Some will feel threatened. This is why the journey feels isolating at first. Not because you're doing something wrong, but because you're doing something they're not ready for. If you confuse that discomfort with rejection, you'll sabotage your potential just to regain acceptance you no longer need. Loneliness becomes a filter. It removes the people who only love the old version of you, the unmotivated you, the undisciplined you, the play it safe you. Those who stay are the ones who respect your evolution, not just your presence. And here's the beautiful part. The more you grow, the more you attract people who match your direction rather than your history. But that alignment doesn't happen instantly. You have to walk through the phase where it feels like you're losing more than you're gaining. But what you're truly losing is the weight that once held you down. This phase teaches you self-reliance. When you're no longer surrounded by familiar routines, validation, or company, you develop something far more powerful: internal strength. You learn to motivate yourself, to trust yourself, to guide yourself. You stop seeking approval for every step forward. You stop needing reassurance that your dreams are valid. You learn to stand tall without someone holding your hand. Growth requires solitude because solitude reveals who you are without the influence of others. It's in that quiet, uncomfortable space that you meet the raw, unfiltered version of yourself, and that is where transformation truly begins. Over time, loneliness shifts from something you fear to something you value. It becomes the space where you think deeply, plan wisely, and heal deliberately. It becomes the environment where you break cycles, create new mindsets, and choose better paths. You begin to realize that the people who left weren't meant to witness your evolution. They were meant to be lessons, not lifelong companions. And the people you meet later, the ones who understand your discipline, your boundaries, your ambition, feel more genuine because you're no longer choosing them out of loneliness, but from clarity. And once you cross that threshold, a powerful realization hits you. The loneliness you felt in the beginning was not the cost of growth, it was the preparation for it. It strengthened your resilience, sharpened your focus, and stripped away every dependency that would have weakened your future. You had to walk alone long enough to become someone capable of walking with purpose. Because the truth is, growth is lonely before it's beautiful, but that loneliness is exactly what builds the strength you'll need when beauty finally arrives. The sixth key point is give yourself non-negotiable standards, because without standards, your life becomes a collection of impulses instead of a structure built with intention. Most people live by preferences, what they prefer to do when they're in the mood, what they prefer to avoid when it's uncomfortable, what they prefer to change when life forces their hand. But people who grow, people who elevate, transform, and break cycles don't rely on preferences. They rely on standards. And a standard is not a suggestion. It's a line you do not cross. It's a commitment you do not break. It's a contract you sign with your future self. When you raise your standards, your life has no choice but to rise with them. Standards shape your behavior long before motivation does. They influence how you speak to yourself, how you handle difficulty, how you treat your body, how you respond to stress, how you manage your time, and what you tolerate from others. Without firm standards, life becomes a negotiation. Every day, every moment, you're deciding whether you'll be disciplined or lazy, focused or distracted, intentional or reckless. But when you set non-negotiable standards, the decision is made in advance. You don't have to wonder who you're going to be today. You already know. Standards don't just guide you, they protect you from becoming a lesser version of yourself. Raising your standards also means raising the quality of your environment. Not everything and not everyone gets access to your energy. You start recognizing the conversations that drain you, the habits that weaken you, the people who discourage you, and the behaviors that contradict who you want to become. Every upgrade in your standards requires an upgrade in your boundaries. You stop tolerating disrespect, not because you're better than anyone, but because you value yourself enough not to shrink. You stop accepting excuses from others because you've stopped accepting them from yourself. You don't entertain negativity because your mind is already occupied building a better life. The powerful thing about standards is that they transform your identity. When you consistently hold yourself to a higher expectation, you begin to see yourself as someone capable, disciplined, driven, and reliable. That identity creates an internal shift. Your self-respect grows, your confidence grows, your clarity grows. You stop questioning whether you deserve success because your habits prove that you do. People often chase confidence like it's a feeling, but confidence is actually the byproduct of self-respect, and self-respect is built through standards you refuse to break. Of course, setting higher standards isn't easy. It requires letting go of shortcuts, temporary pleasures, and habits that once felt comforting. It forces you to confront your inconsistencies, your weaknesses, and the parts of your life you've outgrown. Sometimes it means distancing yourself from people who prefer the old, undisciplined version of you. Sometimes it means saying no to things you once said yes to without thought. And sometimes it means doing things you don't want to do, because you know the future version of you deserves that effort. Standards aren't comfortable, they're catalytic. They stretch you until you fit the level of life you've been aiming for. Over time, your standards become your foundation. They define what you accept, what you reject, and what you pursue. They determine the quality of your relationships, the strength of your habits, and the direction of your growth. You no longer ask, "What can I get away with?" You ask, "What aligns with who I am becoming?" That single shift changes everything, because once your standards rise, your tolerance for mediocrity, both in yourself and in your environment, disappears. You start operating with a sense of purpose, discipline, and integrity that cannot be shaken. And that is when your transformation stops being a goal and starts being a lifestyle. The seventh key point is become someone your future self will thank, because every choice you make today is shaping the person you're becoming tomorrow. Most people chase what feels good in the moment, forgetting that the future version of them has to live with the consequences. But when you start making decisions with your future self in mind, you begin building a life rooted in purpose instead of impulse. You stop asking, "What do I want right now?" and start asking, "What will matter later?" That shift in mindset is the beginning of a new identity, one grounded in wisdom, discipline, and long-term vision. To become someone your future self will thank, you must begin by understanding that your future is not determined by hope, it's determined by habits. The life you dream of won't magically appear. It's built brick by brick through the actions you take consistently. If your future self is stronger, wealthier, healthier, wiser, more confident, more fulfilled, that didn't happen by accident. That happened because the present version of you refused to settle for shortcuts or small thinking. You understood that long-term rewards are worth more than temporary comfort, and you acted accordingly. Every sacrifice you make, every discipline you enforce, every temptation you resist becomes a silent gift to the person you're becoming. But this journey also demands honesty. You have to look at your patterns and ask yourself if they're leading you forward or holding you back. Are you building habits that serve your future, or habits that sabotage it? Are you investing in your mind or numbing it with distractions? Are you protecting your energy or letting anything and anyone drain it? Becoming someone your future self will thank is not about perfection, it's about alignment. It's about making choices that move you closer to your goals instead of further away. It's about recognizing when you're living for the moment and choosing instead to live for your mission. This mindset changes the way you handle challenges. Instead of viewing obstacles as roadblocks, you start seeing them as training. Hard days build resilience your future self will rely on. Difficult conversations strengthen confidence your future self will embody. Failures teach lessons your future self will use to rise higher. When you understand that you're not just surviving the present, you're preparing your future, you approach adversity with a new level of courage. What once felt like punishment now feels like preparation. What once discouraged you now refines you. As you commit to becoming a better future version of yourself, you also begin to develop patience. You stop rushing the process because you understand that meaningful transformation is slow, intentional, and layered. You stop comparing yourself to others because you know you're building a life with depth, not spectacle. You stop quitting at the first sign of struggle because you understand that your future self deserves the rewards that come only through perseverance. The more you think in terms of decades instead of days, the wiser and stronger your decisions become, and eventually a transformation takes place. Quiet at first, then undeniable. You start trusting yourself more because your actions consistently honor your goals. You feel grounded because your choices align with your vision. You wake up with purpose because you know every effort, every sacrifice, every disciplined moment is constructing a future you'll be proud to live in. Your future self becomes not just a dream but a partner, an anchor guiding your decisions and a vision pulling you forward. And with every step you take, you're not just improving your life, you're recreating a legacy. The future version of you will thank you for every single day. In the end, everything you want, every dream, every breakthrough, every transformation begins and ends with you. Not with luck, not with timing, not with circumstances, but with the choices you make when no one is watching. Life isn't asking you to be perfect. It's asking you to be responsible for your potential. It's asking you to rise above your excuses, to silence your doubt, to challenge your weakness, and to outgrow the version of you that kept settling for less. Your future is not waiting for miracles. It's waiting for movement. It's waiting for the moment you say, "Enough, I'm done being who I've been. It's time to become who I'm meant to be." And when that moment comes, when you finally choose growth over comfort, discipline over delay, courage over fear, your entire life shifts. Doors open, opportunities appear, strength rises, purpose awakens. You are not here to repeat the same year of your life over and over. You are here to expand, to evolve, to break cycles, to rewrite your story with intention and fire. So step into your power, step into your discipline, step into the version of you that refuses to settle. The world doesn't need another person who plays small. It needs someone willing to grow, willing to improve, willing to lead their own life with conviction. And that someone is you. Now go. Become impossible to ignore. Become undeniable. Become the person your future self will look back on with gratitude, pride, and awe. Because the moment you force yourself to improve, you don't just change your life, you elevate everything connected to it.